On today's episode,
the intellectual powerhouse, the CEO of SoulPancake, Shabnam Mogharabi.
This idea of detaching myself from the outcome, saying, I'm gonna try for something, but if it doesn't happen, it's not gonna be the end of the world. And the other thing that became really powerful was, frankly, gratitude. I'm really grateful that I'm building this tribe and community and connecting with people that are so like-minded to me.
And that's something that I hear really successful people talk a lot about, taking time out of your day every day to practice gratitude.
It's time to go inside Quest with host Tom Bilyeu, president and co-founder of the second fastest growing private company in America. And now, he's uncovering the universal principles of success.
When you look at what holds people back, it's universally fear.
Inside Quest starts right now.
Hey everybody, welcome to Inside Quest. We're the happy factory for your mind. Our goal is to bring on amazing people that can help us bake our brains into a fully formed mental delight. And if you're looking to add a little joy to your list of lifelong pursuits, there's no better guest than the woman joining us today. A self-proclaimed overachiever, this woman's educational and business accomplishments alone have to be read in chapters over a long weekend. She holds a master's degree in publishing from Northwestern University and a bachelor's degree from USC, fight on for old SC, where she double majored in business administration and journalism with a minor in comparative religion. In her previous work life, she was an award-winning journalist, covering a wide range of topics, but always focused on substantive issues around the very nature of what it means to be a human. Hell-bent to bring more joy into her own life and the lives of others, this former Eeyore willed her way into being a Tigger after Rainn Wilson stole her idea for using media to make spirituality cool again. But rather than latching onto Rainn's face in anger like one of those face huggers from Alien, admittedly her initial response, she decided she would convince him to let her help build this empire of positivity. And convince him she did, giving birth to an entirely new career for her and massive success for the duo. Please help me in welcoming the intellectual powerhouse who danced her way through the glass ceiling, a woman who has hundreds of millions of content views to her name, has collaborated with Oprah, the United Nations, Coca-Cola, and Google, just to name a few, as well as co-authored the New York Times best-selling book SoulPancake, Chew on Life's Big Questions, the CEO of SoulPancake, one of Fast Company's 10 most innovative companies of 2015, Shabnam Mogharabi. Shabnam, thank you so much for joining us. What is up, my dear?
Absolutely. Have you ever considered a career in screenwriting? That was an amazing introduction. It was like a feature film unfolding before me.
Wow, well thank you. Funny you should mention it. My degree was in film.
Well,
so
there you go.
At one time I did, in fact, yeah. Okay, so I warned you a little bit ahead of time. So you and I have the good fortune, we've met a couple times before, gotten to spend some time together. I actually got really emotional in front of you on a topic that we were discussing. So I've already been the raw, goofy version of myself. So now it's your turn to come on and
So you're
be in
going to
the
make
hot
me
seat.
cry?
I hope,
Is that what's going to happen here?
I hope we
Okay.
get somewhere that interesting. I won't say that precipitation from the eyes is specifically my goal, but in really going deep and watching all your interviews and putting it together with what I know about you and what you guys are doing at SoulPancake, it's really, I think, sincere that you're trying to change the world. People say that a lot, and it's one of the things that I respond to either with tremendous joy or much consternation, depending on the person and what they're doing in their life to actually make good on that, because I think it's easy to say, and I think a lot of people want to say it. In fact, for a certain type of person, I think it's a near innate trait. Like people really have a desire, they want to impact change. And we'll talk about trolls a little bit later, but I actually think it's a similar thing that makes somebody want to troll, that makes somebody want to change the world. You want to feel like when I act, there's a reverberation through the world, right? And I think that feeds that desire. Now, when it manifests positively, as it does in your world, it can truly turn into something beautiful. What I want to do with today's show, and this is admittedly a bit of flying without a net, but I thought it would be really fun to do specifically with you.
Okay.
In real time, right here, let's actually try to change the world by changing the lives of the people that are here, by affecting their habits, which I think is probably the root of where that's going to happen.
We really are operating without a net here.
Yeah.
You guys ready for this? Okay.
So yeah, are you game?
Let's do it.
All right, cool. So I think first we have to define terms. What does it mean to you to change the world? What are you actually setting out to do when you say that?
So I've always found that when people say change the world, it's this big, daunting, unachievable thing. And it can be scary, and we're all so busy. We have emails and families and kids and friends and work, and there's just so much going on in our lives that to think like I want to change the world is just so big and unachievable. And so for me, I think changing the world happens in small increments. And it's small changes in your mindset, small actions you can take, small, gestures you can do to other people. But it starts very small. And it's really only in those small little incremental steps that you can actually do this big, profound, inachievable thing of changing the world. Everything happens in little incremental steps. Even when you look at major movements in history, like the civil rights movement, that didn't happen with one person snapping their fingers. Martin Luther King Jr. was not the pinnacle end-all be-all of civil rights change. It was all of these incremental steps that got us to that point where that massive revolution happened. And so for me, changing the world is those small incremental steps and measures and actions and thoughts and gestures that move us in that direction.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's actually what I was hoping we would get out of today. Obviously, I don't expect to, at the end of this episode, not that I want to limit myself, but I don't expect at the end of this episode that like somehow the world will be fundamentally different and there'll be, like an IQ plot on a timeline of world history where it said, and that day that Shabnam came on. But I think that, like you said, there really are little things that people can do right now. And those are the things I want to focus on. So, but before we get to that, because I think people have to understand what they're actually fighting for before they understand being able to change. So you consider yourself an ambassador of joy.
Yes.
You consider your whole company, SoulPancake, to be leading that joyful movement. Why don't we start there? Help us understand why joy is important, what you think that helps people overcome, and then specifically what a more joyful world would look like.
Okay. So joy is interesting because a lot of times people make joy synonymous with happiness, and I don't think that's the truth. I think that happiness is an emotion that is fleeting. You go to a Taylor Swift concert and you are happy. You get a new car, you're happy. But I think the feeling of joy is something that emanates from within, and it's more of a state of being, and it's a way of looking at the world that is different from the actual emotion of happiness.
Right.
And so there's a great kind of field of called positive psychology. I'm going to get so academic on you guys, like just watch.
Take us there.
But Dr. Martin Seligman is this great psychologist who founded the realm of positive psychology. And for decades, psychology was about what is wrong with us, right? What is wrong with our brains? How can we deal with those things that are going wrong, and the traumas that we've had, and how our brains and our emotions kind of work together to reflect our kind of psyche. But what he said is, no one's ever looked at like, you're a happy person. You're a well-adjusted person. What makes you tick? What is the psychology of you that allows you to be that kind of a person and have this well-adjusted psyche? So he basically founded this space of positive psychology, and he did a ton of studies in this realm. And one of the ones that I think is the most fascinating that he did is he basically told all these college students, he brought them in and he said, okay, you've got 24 hours, go out and make yourself as happy as you can. So what did they do? They went out and partied, they had sex, they took drugs, they went wild, and they did all the things they could possibly think of, and they came back and did a test, and they were all universally less happy than they were 24 hours earlier.
As measured by what? Because that's so fascinating,
yes.
But I need to understand.
So they have there's a test that you can take. There's kind of these vetted questions that you can take that measure kind of on various scales, how you describe your mood, what level of happiness you ascribe to yourself. How did you feel yesterday at the same time? How do you feel today? Do you feel less or worse, empowered or excited or about the future? So there's a bunch of different questions that you can ask, and it is a little subjective because obviously someone is answering questions and subjectively trying to express their emotions to you. But did this study, and they came back and just weren't happy. So then he had them go out and do, essentially service activities, like find someone and express your gratitude to them, or have them express their gratitude to you, or go out and help someone who isn't asking for help. And they came back, and lo and behold, their happiness was increased. And so I think what that shows is that if you go out trying to give yourself that fleeting moment of happiness, I'm going to go to a party, I'm going to have that moment. It's not quite the same as if you go out and do something that might have a more lasting impact both on yourself and someone else. And suddenly that has more of a lasting impact on your own internal feelings. And so it was a really fascinating just study and kind of field that he pioneered. And it's one that we've explored at SoulPancake. And it's one that I think really truly reflects the kind of joy that we're talking about when we're creating our content.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So going into that concept of what you guys are doing with specific content that is very much your voice, very much your niche, aimed at the optimistic millennial.
Yes.
You guys have really captured something. And I know your favorite piece of content that you've done was the compliments.
Yes.
Street compliments.
Street compliments. We set up a headphones and a phone booth and a sign that said, give a compliment, get a compliment. And we asked people who were walking around to come in and stand inside one or the other and give compliments, because sometimes you forget to tell people how awesome they are. Even people you spend all your time with, your husband, your spouse, your coworker, your friend, you sometimes forget to tell them how grateful you are for them in your life and to tell them how awesome they are. And so we set up this little experiment to get people to give each other compliments. It's a great video.
It is a great video. It's really profound. If you guys haven't seen it, go check it out. You can find it on youtube.com/SoulPancake, Street Compliments. It really, watching it like gives you the chills. Like, because you're seeing just like, you recognize yourself in basically everybody that comes. And so you see all these different aspects of your own life where it's like, okay, my relationship with my mom, or my relationship with my best friend, or my relationship with my wife, they all play out in these different people who, you know, give each other compliments. But the thing I think that is so interesting in watching that video is you see these people being impacted by the compliments in real time.
Yeah.
Right? Like and did they know they were being filmed?
Yes, so they all knew they were being filmed, but they were ordinary people off the street. So we set up this little experiment and we had our cameras running, and then we would just go up to these people on the street and say, hey, we're doing this thing. We just want, the two of you to come in and give each other compliments. And then in doing it, I think even they are amazed at the impact that it can have to just take that 5 seconds to get outside of their day-to-day grind and do something that impacts their heart.
Yeah, it's interesting. Watching it was convinced they didn't know they were being filmed, because the reactions are so subtle and so real that you really capture like this moment between two people that you facilitated that moment. And that's maybe the most interesting thing to me. So when you talk about changing the world, there's no passivity in that. Right? And you and I were talking about that briefly before we came out. There's no passivity to change, right? So whether you guys want to change your own life, you want to change the lives of others, there's no passivity in that. It's not going to happen. You have to get out and make it happen. There's very specific things you're going to have to do. We're going to talk about what those are, but you've got to get really, really specific. So seeing you guys construct this moment where that is, I promise you, one of the most memorable things that's ever happened to those people. And to this day, I bet they remember. There was like a really great father and daughter one where you can tell like the guy's just not used to saying out loud those things that he probably thinks about his daughter a lot. There's one where the daughter clearly is in a rebellious phase, and she says so matter-of-factly, like, I know I reject you all the time, but I love you. And I hope you know, like you could tell, like she really wanted him to know, like, hey, just because I'm pushing you away. But anyway, the point of that for me is that you manufactured this moment, you forced these people into the, and their lives actually were changed. Now, to a degree, obviously, it wasn't going to change the entire course of the rest of their life, but it really gave them a piece to hold on to, something that was really memorable.
I really hope that's true. I hope that they did take something small away from that, because I do feel that one of the things we try really hard to do at SoulPancake is create content that you can come back to over the course of your lifetime. So you might watch something when you're 25 and trying to figure out what kind of career you want to pursue, and it has one impact on you. And then you come back and you watch it, 7 years later when you're married and have had your first child, and suddenly it has a completely different meaning to you. And so we're trying really hard to give people those little moments, and we're trying to create content that gives you those feelings and moments that you can carry with you.
Okay, so now let's make it universal for these guys, because I think it's important. So the whole line started with what's the importance of joy, right? This is a very big deal to her, and the more you guys research her, and guys, do yourself a favor, go on YouTube, look her up. She's given some amazing speeches. And one theme that you use in your speeches a lot is this notion of joy, and how joy just sort of opens up this new world, a new way of thinking, a new way of acting for people. And we're going to get to your own transformation from former Eeyore to current Tigger in a second. But so the reason that I find joy so fascinating, especially when delineated away from happiness. So I did the math again the other day. I interview roughly 2 people a day on average. Some days it's 5 and some days it's none. But on average, I interview 2 people a day, 5 days a week. You run the math on that, it's about 500 people a year. I used to think I'd interviewed about 1,200 people, but it's much more than that now that I really look at the mathematics of it. And there is just one consistent theme: people want to be happy. So when I think about changing the world, I think purely from a brain chemistry standpoint, that at the end of the day, people are grasping for a certain feeling, but they chase the fleeting one. They chase happiness, and they don't focus on, you define it as joy, I define it as framework happiness, but I think that they're very similar. So let's keep going down that path of why do you think, and maybe you can give it to me from a biological perspective or whatever one makes the most sense to you, but why is that a more lasting form of happiness? If partying doesn't give you the answer that you want, but going out and being of service, helping people does, why?
I think it's because of what I was saying earlier. I think it's the lasting impact of it.
But why does it have a more lasting impact? What is it about humans that makes us long for that?
It's so part of human nature to want to connect and belong, and to feel like you've got a community around you that loves and supports you and is there for you, whether that's your family or your friends or your colleagues. It's just that we all crave it. We crave it so much. And I think what happens when you go out and you seek those small fleeting moments of happiness, you're doing it for yourself, and you're not doing it in a way that connects you with anyone around you or with a larger community. Whereas when you go out and you serve other people, or you express gratitude to people, or you create spaces where people can come together and connect, those things build community, and those things form those connections with other people. And it's those connections, it's literally those things that fill that undeniable urge, whether it's physical or emotional or psychological, whatever it is, that our root core that we crave, that it's that feeling of connection and belonging. I mean, it's why they say, babies need to have skin-to-skin contact the minute they're born. We have to feel connected. We are hardwired to feel connected. And so it's in seeking the things that bring us connection, I think, that you can get that lasting, what I call joy.
All right, you've just given us our first big breakthrough, and if this is as far as we get, I'll be a very happy camper. So hopefully you guys heard what I just heard. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to be employing this immediately in my life. You can hold me to task on this one, but this is what I just heard. Many change agents, if you think of yourself as a change agent, certainly entrepreneurs, ultimately, what they're looking to do, let's go back to the delineation between momentary happiness, framework happiness, or happiness and joy, right? People chase money. Money's momentary happiness, and it really is happiness. It really will, just like going to a party kicks ass until you wake up the next day with a hangover. It really is fun, and to deny that it's not fun is a fool's errand. You never be able to convince people that it's not enjoyable. It is. A bowl of ice cream is equally enjoyable until you wake up and your body's not responding the way that you'd want, and but the bowl of ice cream itself was amazing. And to try to convince somebody that it's not is a fool's errand. You can put someone in an fMRI machine and you will see that they really do respond very positively to eating that. It's like a drug. You guys know all of that. Okay, so just to insert my own story here for a second, I'm sure it applies equally well to yours. I chased money for years, almost a decade, came up emotionally bankrupt, was not at all what I thought it would be. It left me feeling drained and unable to carry on. So finally, I literally, in a theatrical manner, say, I'm going to stop chasing money. I'm never going to ask another question again, except for what brings more value. And in asking that question, what I was really doing was building a tribe. And that's the thing that you just locked in place for me, is that as humans that desire to connect, ultimately, if you're trying to build a business, what your goal should be is to build a tribe and then to serve that tribe. Whether you're serving them with a product or a service is somewhat irrelevant. At the end of the day, you're trying to bring value to that tribe, and that's going to give you, dear person sitting across from me in an interview, when you say you want happiness, that's going to give you that sense of satisfaction that actually comes from serving other people. All right, now that you
Wait, I have to ask you a question.
Please.
So you leave this big, wealthy world that you were living in, and you were pursuing that source. What stopped you all that time from leaving?
Wow. So here's the honest answer, and I will give credit to one Peter Furman of First China Capital. He, super legit dude, met him in our last business. He came in and advised for us for a while and was sort of the only voice of reason when we were three basically kids trying to convince VCs to buy our company, and we ourselves referred to it as a child born to be sold into slavery, which somehow we convinced ourselves that that's what a VC wants to hear, which of course what they want to hear is that you're more passionate about this than anything else in your life and you're never going to stop until it succeeds.
Yeah.
So, hey, look, we had a hard time finding money. What a shock. And Peter said, and I actually just wrote about this on my Instagram feed, sometimes quitting and giving up is exactly what you need to do. But I had told myself a story that I'm the guy that never gives up. So I was banging my head against this wall over and over, and I wasn't willing to give up because I was telling myself a narrative about being willing to suffer more than other people. The suffering was just a part of it, right? So yeah, of course I have to suffer. That's part of what makes me so powerful is I'm willing to suffer. Other people would have given up long ago, but not me. I'm just going to keep suffering. And then finally, I realized there's a difference between quitting on your goals and quitting on a path that is clearly a dead end.
Yeah.
So I was not yet the man I needed to be, and I could not delineate between a dead-end path and my goal.
I love that.
Thank you. All right, so you're dropping nuggets of gold here for us, so let's keep going down that. Tell us how you went from Eeyore to Tigger. First, tell people what that means. I love that, by the way. But what does that mean?
Winnie the Pooh fans, right? You guys know. The Eeyore is the negative Nelly who focuses on what isn't possible and what can't happen and woe is me. And then the Tigger is the exuberant, joyful, bouncy, chaos-inducing character, right? And the reason that I have used that analogy of being an Eeyore and becoming a Tigger is because of how I got involved with SoulPancake. So, I was always, like Tom said, an overachiever. And so my whole life was I have to achieve. And as a result of naturally constantly wanting to achieve, every time there was even the smallest failure, I got a C on a test instead of an A. Any one of those things would be this like, oh, woe is me. Life is so hard. This isn't, yes, I'm going to keep working to try to get those perfect A's, but every little failure was just this opportunity for me to wallow in the negative of it. And what ended up happening was, I went to get my master's degree at Northwestern and wrote a thesis there about wanting to create a media platform that was about spiritual and philosophical topics, a more relevant media platform. 7 years later, I hear Rainn on the radio talking about this thing he's going to call SoulPancake, and of course my immediate thought is he stole my idea, right? And I was legitimately angry, and I was totally Eeyoring it, and I was just like, celebrities, they have the money, they can go start these things. I could never start something like this. And after a couple months of just constantly thinking about it, I don't know what flipped in my brain, but something just flipped where it was like, well, why couldn't I be part of it? Why couldn't I be part of this thing that he's starting? Maybe I don't have the resources to start it, but he clearly did. So let me go out and see if I can find a way to be involved in it. And so I just started emailing everyone I knew until I got in touch with Rainn's business partner. Literally just by sheer, willpower, I just knocked on as many doors as I could until I got in the space. And SoulPancake brought me so much joy working on that because it was something that I had cared about for so long and hadn't been able to make possible for myself. And here was this opportunity to do that. That what I realized was that, by having this Eeyore mentality, I had very much so told myself there was no way I was going to do that, or that was just not a path for me. But I had told myself this for so long, and I realized after working at SoulPancake and being part of that company and the way that I got into it, that I was like, wow, if I just shifted my perspective to be more positive, anything can happen, the world is my oyster, and any opportunity is possible if I just figure out a way to navigate it the right way, and I have the right attitude about it, then things can happen. And so it was this really pivotal moment where I needed to shift my perspective on the world and the way I look at things as everything being an opportunity and a way for me to navigate it with I'm not going to worry about the outcome. I'm just going to go in it full force with the best positive attitude ever. And it felt very Tigger-ish to me. And what ended up happening was I just told myself, you know what, like this shift needs to happen. I'm so happy at SoulPancake. This is what I've always wanted to do. This shift needs to happen. How can I make this shift? And I really did do a lot of reading and soul searching about, what are the things that have always brought me to that state of really positively looking at the world and seeing everything as a potential opportunity and not being, frankly, attached to the outcome. And that was really a profound thing, that this idea of detaching myself from the outcome, saying, I'm going to try for something, but if it doesn't happen, it's not going to be the end of the world. And that's okay. And there's going to be another opportunity that comes along. And the power of every day saying, like, I'm really grateful that I have this SoulPancake opportunity. I'm really grateful that I have these amazing people that I'm working with. I'm really grateful that I'm building this tribe and community and connecting with people that are so like-minded to me. So I implemented for myself these kind of dual principles of detachment and gratitude, and suddenly my entire mindset changed. And it was really kind of powerful for me. And the last 5 years have really been a completely different life that I've lived because of it.
Wow, that's amazing. Those are very actionable. And since today's all about action, help them understand how you did that. Because those to me are magic tricks. To go from just having a sort of natural, whether you earned it over time or not, but you had at that time what felt like a very natural negative disposition, always seeing the can'ts in the situation instead of the cans. How did you switch that? And I know you tried to skirt by that one saying, I don't know what happened, but I want to poke a little bit on that one. And then the other one of just taking a time out of your day every day to practice gratitude. And that's something that I hear really successful people talk a lot about. I hear people talk about gratitude and I hear people talk about meditating. And it's fascinating in terms of if you look at the most successful people I meet, you're going to hear those two things over and over and over. So how did you get to it and how do you continue to cultivate it?
Yeah. It's interesting that you say meditation, because actually prayer is something that is very powerful for me. And it was something that I started doing more of about 5-6 years ago, which I think had a profound effect on that mindset as well for me. And I'm not a particularly religious person. I do believe there's a God. And when I say prayer, it really to me is just voicing things to this larger being that I believe exists in some form. And every night I had a journal. I had a journal that I wrote something I was grateful for every night. And they say that, it takes 27 days to form a habit. I did it for a solid 6 months. And then I didn't need the notebook anymore. Right. I went to bed every night thinking about what was that moment today that I was really happy for? What was that thing? Because it's so easy. It is so easy, especially when you're in the grind of running a business or just working. It's so easy to be like, oh, I didn't get that email out. Oh, I didn't deal with that contract. Oh, I didn't, call my aunt and wish her a happy birthday. There's so many things that you can ding yourself on that you didn't get to or that you have to deal with the next day. But if you also take just one moment to say, wow, that was amazing. I got that awesome email from a fan about how our video changed their day. Or, wow, my employee today came and said, I'm so grateful to work here. If I just focused on one thing that was awesome from the day, it really, truly, I went to bed feeling more calm, feeling more assured that the next day was going to be just fine, and being able to have the energy, frankly, to keep going, because life is hard.
Okay. I love that you understand the power of habits. I think that's a really, really big deal. What are some habits that you see in people that are holding them back?
That's a really hard question and a good question. I think sometimes one of the hardest habits to break is, and I actually do think it is a habit, it is It's actually a principle that Tina Fey talked about in her book, of all the people. But Tina Fey in her book talks about
This is Bossy Pants,
in Bossy Pants, and Sheryl Sandberg talks about it as well in her book. But it's what they both call this imposter syndrome. I don't know if you guys know what this is. So the imposter syndrome is this feeling that like you're in this role and you have this opportunity, and in the back of your mind there's a little voice that's telling you like you don't actually belong here. You're totally faking them out. And so I think there is this habit that you can fall into of self-doubt. And I think that is the hardest one to break, and it is also the most detrimental if you don't break it, because there is something about a humble confidence that can not only open doors, but can enable you to make sometimes hard decisions and can enable you to grow in ways that you didn't think you were able to grow, and to accept your shortcomings, to say like, you know what, I don't know everything, but it's okay that I don't know everything. I can learn those things. I can rely on other people who do know those things. I don't have to know all the answers and I don't have to be the best at everything, but I know that I'm here for a reason and I've earned what I'm doing, and I need to keep building on that. And it's a really, really hard thing to do, to turn off that self-doubt. It is so hard. It is the hardest habit to break.
Do you know Dr. Daniel Amen by any chance?
I don't.
Really fascinating guy. Wrote a book called Making a Good Brain Great, and he talks about those negative thoughts. He calls them ants, and if I remember right, it's an acronym for something. Unfortunately, it's automatic negative thoughts, maybe. It's that simple. I think that may be it, automatic negative thoughts. And he's like, you know, you've got these ants in your brain, you've got to stamp them out, you've got to get religious, because you're absolutely right, they're a habit. And you get so used to hearing that voice, and there really are two voices in your head, one that is you in the empowered state, and then one that's you in the fearful, not good enough state, and you're going to hear more from whatever voice you feed. So if you don't, in terms of going back to habits, when I read Amen's book, that really, one, made me aware that, okay, A, it isn't just me, right? I'm not crazy. Everybody has that imposter syndrome, or they have that voice in the back of their head that's constantly saying like, you're never gonna be able to do that. And learning to stamp it out the second it speaks up in my head. Like you have to, you've got to be all on top of it. And in fact, in terms of habits that will change your life, that to me is one of the most profoundly impactful habits I think any human being can have, to just relentlessly get those negative thoughts out of your head. You know they're gonna be there, you know they're gonna pop up. And the irony is, I don't care who you're talking to, they have them as well. So rather than picturing people in their underwear, if you're anxious, just know in their head is that same negative voice that is fucking with them just as much as it's messing with you. Like for real, that's just the human condition. So once you realize, okay, this is what it is essentially is the lizard brain trying to keep you safe from being eaten by a lion. The great news is we don't let lions roam around the halls, at least not here. So you guys are A-okay from that. But getting them out of your head, not focusing on that, because it doesn't serve you, right? And it was that whole feedback loop that really got me thinking about it. You can't just say, I'm only going to make decisions to act in ways that move me towards my goals. I'm going to make decisions about what I believe based on whether they move me towards my goals or not. So even if I really am incompetent at something, if it doesn't serve me to believe that, I'm not going to believe it. And if I really am world class at something, but it doesn't serve me to believe that, if it serves me more to focus on where I'm weak, then that's what I'll do. But learning to take control of those ants is so powerful.
And I think it's also about what you said is actually very profound. I think all of us have fears, have worries, have insecurities. We all are worried that we're not going to belong, we're not going to connect, and that's so human. And I think fear really can be such a driving force for so many people. It can really be this thing that if you don't learn how to deal with it and how to cope with it, it can stop you from doing anything. Fear's good, like it protects us from the lions and it protects us from jumping off of cliffs without a parachute, right? Fear has a place and it is necessary, but I think where fear prevents us from moving forward is where we tell ourselves that we're not good enough for something, or that we don't know how to do something and might fail if we try. And this fear of failure is something that I think is very is a very easy fear to squash and put out. Failure is just, oh, that door didn't open, so let me go find another door that will. Suddenly there's no failure to fear, and I think that can be a really powerful thing to help us as well.
I totally agree. Now, you have very creative employees.
Yes.
So I know that they put themselves out there in a big way when they're pitching an idea. I mean, you are emotionally naked in front of people, and they are going to either love your idea and it feels amazing, or they're going to just bring it down, and it's going to suck. So even just that emotion will be hard enough to deal with. How specifically do you train them to bring that sense of failing isn't being a failure, it is simply finding a door that's not open, and you move on to the next one? How do you actually train them to really emotionally prepare for that?
So this comes back to this idea of attachment that I was talking about, because the reason that people, especially in the creative field, what I found is that people get very attached to their ideas. They think, oh, this is the idea that is it. This is my one big idea. It's the best idea I'm ever going to have. And so they become very attached to it. And so if you bring an idea to the table, you have to kind of let go of your precious jewels, right? You have to be willing to let go of those, because nothing can be so sacrosanct that it can't be improved. And you have to be willing to let go and be detached from any idea that you bring into the room. So every time we have big brainstorms or pitch sessions or anything like that, people will come in with their ideas, and we literally will open it up to the floor before anyone rejects it, before anyone says, no, that's not the right idea. No, we don't think that's the right thing. We don't go straight to rejection. And what we do in our brainstorms is we're constantly like, okay, so this is an idea that's on the table. What do people think about that? Any ways to improve this idea? Any ways to maybe take a different spin on this idea? So that people understand that your idea is not sacrosanct.
Does it take a while for people to get used to that?
Yeah, it really does. It has to be something that you religiously do in every creative meeting. Otherwise, it's not a policy. It's just a one-off thing you do.
Right.
If it's a true policy, you have to do it in every meeting. Otherwise, it doesn't become, human nature as part of your employee nature.
Amazingly powerful advice for me, if no one else. So thank you for that. It's not necessarily something I shine at currently, but now I'm going to improve. So you've already changed me. So
it's really hard. It's really hard, especially because we're all limited for time, right? So you've got an hour and a half that you've set aside for some kind of creative development, and you've got a lot of things to get through. So your tendency is to be like, no, that's not a good enough idea. Let's move on. But the reality is, it's true. It's hard. It's because we're so limited on time. You just want to be like, oh, we got to be efficient. Like, let's move on. I don't like that idea. Let's move on. I don't like that idea. But the reality is, if you're trying to create a culture where people will just throw out the best ideas and not be attached to them so that things do rise to the top, you want to be able to explore everyone to its fullest extent. And that always means that you have to break down some of the principles of it, and you have to take it in other directions. And so people just see their ideas evolve in front of them without them necessarily being the keeper of that. And so they have to naturally form this detachment. And so what you'll find is that over time, nobody's then upset that their idea wasn't picked.
Right.
What you see is that people are constantly willing to push each other in great places, and you really do get the best things percolating to the top that way.
That's really, really strong. That's so actionable. Thank you. Did you read Ed Catmull's book, Creativity Inc.?
It's an amazing book.
Amazing, right?
An amazing book.
Yeah.
He's a genius.
Yeah. The results speak for themselves,
Yeah.
right? For those of you who don't know him, he's the president of Pixar and was a key
creative visionary for them.
For sure,
Yeah.
and helped with the integration between Disney and Pixar. And I mean, Pixar's legacy is just monumental, and now Disney has been totally revitalized. And he writes a book about starting from the imposter phase where you're like, how did I end up in this job? Like, I have no right to be here whatsoever. But since I'm here, let me see if I can figure things out.
Yeah.
And really just takes you in this beautifully candid journey of discovery and mistakes and what they learned from and the policies and things that they put in place. And I really hear some of that kind of well thought out wisdom from you in dealing with creatives. And again, the results speak for themselves. You guys are absolutely killing it.
Thank you.
Very consistent voice. A lot of great content. And just in what you've walked us through today in terms of habits, putting your finger, first of all, that habits are the problem, giving us habits that we can change, it's amazing. Now I want to go into the really uncomfortable world. If we're Peter's Law, it's like number 26 or something. If you don't know Peter Diamandis, just an amazing human being. His laws, which I find just guiding posts in my life, said if it can't be measured, it can't be improved. So what are the metrics by which you and I are going to determine whether we've changed the world today?
Let's figure this out together. So we've asked for habits.
Yep.
Right.
I think it's gonna be tied to that for sure.
So some of what were the habits we came to over this hour? There was gratitude, the power of expressing gratitude every day.
Negative thoughts in your mind, gotta
squashing
keep those
the negative
out.
thoughts.
Yep. If you find yourself in an Eeyore situation, you have to
Take
break
action
free
to
of
do
that. Detachment, all of which I think you can even abstract from the creative world and just apply to your life.
Yep.
And then even going beyond the habits, identifying what you're actually trying to do with whatever the core thesis is of your life, whatever that mission is at the end of the day, understanding that what it really is it's tied to creating that tribe, building a community, and then bringing value to that community rather than chasing the momentary bump of a hit of cocaine or a toke on the meth pipe. So, let us find more substance.
Wow,
so,
you summarized that. He summarized that really well. That was great.
You didn't expect meth to come into it, though,
I didn't. I wasn't expecting that, but that's all right.
So here are
I guess we can measure that by these guys, right?
That's what I was going to say.
I mean, if we were social scientists and conducting some kind of study, we would send them out today saying, try to implement one of these habits, and in a week, see how many of them are feeling like they were able to do it and if it had an impact on them. So maybe that's the measurable
That is amazing.
element.
Now I'm going to take it to the quest level, and I'm going to say, rewatch the episode, write down every habit or thing that you come across without exception, and implement them immediately into your life. Then, let's say 30 days from now, it takes 27 days to make a habit, right? A month from now, we will regroup and we will see where everybody is and report back, and we'll do a special episode about what you guys did, what habits you've changed, what impact it's had on your life. So if you were hoping to show up today as an anonymous person in this audience, that just went out the window.
Too bad.
So yeah, we will do a special recap episode, and you guys will bring us up to speed, and I think that's pretty fair.
Okay, sounds good.
That sound good?
I love it.
All right.
All right.
Were we going for a high five there?
I was going to go for a high five.
There it is. All right. Shabnam, thank you so much for being on with us today. It was amazing. And you were the first person to really just go without a net with me today. Try something completely new. It was amazing. So you've given, in researching you and in spending time with you, every time I get something special. I hope one day for you guys and you guys watching at home or listening in the podcast, that you get time to spend one-on-one with her, because what you're not getting up here, and one of the most interesting things, this woman does not play around. She's got a fast-moving company. It is bustling. They're dealing with some of the biggest corporations in the world. When you count Google and Coke, the United Nations, as customers, you can imagine the stakes are very high. The speed is fast. There's a lot at stake on the line. But when you walk into their offices, it's amazing. It's like walking into a human wall of fresh air. It is so cool, and people are so upbeat, and it's effortless leadership, or so it seems. I know behind the scenes you're overachieving yourself and deny oblivion.
That's very sweet.
But it really was cool to see her in that environment and to see her be, as Cesar Millan would say, confident and assertive, all while being mellow and relaxed. So very, very impressive. You're an incredible human being. And I'm honored to have had you on the show.
Thank you.
Guys, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. This is a weekly show. We want to see you back here. If you're listening to the podcast, I hope you're listening at 2 or 3x. It's the only way to fly. If you're on YouTube, you can take it to 2x. They don't let you do 3, much to my dismay. But I sound a lot more intelligent on 2 or 3x, so do me a favor. Until then, guys, we will see you next week. Be legendary. Take care.